This is the month that decides whether your phlox looks like a magazine photo or like something coated in gray flour. The plant that was clean and covered in flower clusters in July suddenly has leaves turning grayish-white from the bottom up. Or the whole clump has gone quiet after one big bloom and just sits there doing nothing for the rest of the summer. And almost nobody actually explains why this happens, in August specifically, not June, not September. Most gardeners respond the same way every time. They blame the weather. They blame bad luck. They spray something on the leaves after the damage is already done and call it handled. Every one of those responses is treating a symptom instead of the actual cause. And the mistake gardeners make with phlox in this exact month is often the reason the same plant looks worse every single year instead of better. Today, I'm giving you exactly what phlox needs right now, and exactly what's quietly ruining it in gardens all over the country without anyone realizing it. Before we get into it, drop your US state or growing zone in the comments right now. Phlox in Vermont is fighting a completely different battle than phlox in Georgia this month, and I want everything in this video to actually apply to your garden. I read every comment. Let's go. Number 1. Stop planting phlox shoulder to shoulder and thin, overcrowded clumps now. This is the single most overlooked cause of a bad phlox summer, and almost nobody connects it to what they're actually seeing. Phlox paniculata, the tall garden phlox most people grow, needs air moving freely around every stem. When clumps are planted too close together, or when a single clump has been left undivided for 3 or 4 years and is thickened into a dense mass of stems, the air between the leaves stops moving. Humidity sits there. Moisture from dew and rain doesn't dry off the foliage until midday instead of by mid-morning. And that trapped, still, humid air around the leaves is exactly the environment fungal spores need to establish and spread. This isn't a weather problem, it's a spacing problem that weather makes worse. The mistake is assuming a dense, full-looking phlox clump is a healthy sign, when a stem count that thick is actually working against the plant. If your clump has more than 12 to 15 stems packed into a 2-foot area, that's overcrowded. Right now, you can thin selectively. Cut a third of the weakest, thinnest stems down at the base to open up airflow through the middle of the clump. Full division at the roots is a spring job, but midsummer stem thinning is something you can do today, and it changes how much air reaches the leaves for the rest of the season. Space new phlox 18 to 24 inches apart at planting, not 12, no matter how sparse that looks the first year. Number 2, deadhead every spent flower cluster within days, not weeks. Deadheading phlox does 2 things most people only know one of. The obvious one is that it pushes the plant to send up a secondary flush of blooms instead of stopping after the first round. The one almost nobody mentions is what happens if you don't. Phlox paniculata that's allowed to go to seed drops that seed right in the bed, and the seedlings that come up from it are almost never true to the parent variety. A named cultivar like a soft pink or a clean white will very often revert toward the wild species color, which is a plain magenta pink. Give it a few seasons of skipped deadheading and unmanaged seedlings, and a bed you planted with 3 or 4 distinct colors can slowly turn into one dominant magenta patch. And most gardeners have no idea that's what happened, or why. The fix is precise. As soon as a flower cluster starts fading and browning, cut the stem back to just above the topmost set of healthy leaves, not just snipping the flower tip. That redirects the plant's energy into a new flowering stem instead of seed production, and it stops volunteer seedlings before they start. Do this within 3 to 5 days of a cluster fading, all through August, and you'll get a real second flush before the season ends. If this video is actually telling you something about phlox you didn't already know, hit subscribe right now. This channel puts out zone-specific, no-nonsense gardening content every week, and it's free. Number 3, water at the base, in the morning, and never let a sprinkler hit the leaves. This is where the powdery mildew problem and the watering problem are actually the same problem. Overhead watering, especially in the evening, leaves a film of moisture sitting on phlox foliage all night long with no sun or airflow to dry it off. That extended wet leaf window is one of the single biggest triggers for fungal disease on phlox, more than humidity in the air by itself. Water deeply at the base of the plant, roughly 1 to 1.5 inches per week, including rainfall. And do it in the morning so any incidental splash on lower leaves has the entire day to dry. If you're on an automatic sprinkler system that hits the bed from above, that system is very likely a direct contributor to the mildew you're seeing, and moving phlox out of that zone or switching to drip irrigation solves more of the problem than any spray ever will. Number 4, know that the mildew you're blaming on bad luck is often a variety problem, not a care problem. Here's what most gardening content skips entirely. Some phlox cultivars are dramatically more disease-prone than others, regardless of how well you water or space them. Trials run by Mount Cuba Center specifically evaluated dozens of Phlox paniculata cultivars for powdery mildew resistance over multiple growing seasons, and the results were not close. Varieties like Gina and Robert Poor came through consistently clean with minimal mildew, while a lot of older, popular cultivars, including many sold simply as generic garden center phlox with no named resistance, showed heavy infection nearly every year, regardless of growing conditions. If you have a bed that gets powdery mildew every single August, no matter what you do, and you've already fixed spacing and watering, the plant itself may be the problem. David, a clean white variety, is another consistently strong performer for resistance. When you're shopping for replacements this fall or next spring, look specifically for cultivars bred or trialed for mildew resistance, rather than picking whatever's blooming at the garden center that week, because two phlox that look identical on the tag can behave completely differently in your actual climate. Tell me in the comments, does your phlox get powdery mildew every year, no matter what you try? That answer tells me a lot about what this channel should cover next. Number 5. Confirm your phlox is actually still getting 6 or more hours of direct sun. Garden phlox performs best in full sun, and while it tolerates a bit of afternoon shade better than some perennials, reduced light does two damaging things at once in this exact month. It weakens flowering and makes the plant stretch and thin out, and it also reduces how quickly morning dew and moisture evaporate off the leaves, which feeds right back into the mildew problem from a few minutes ago. The same seasonal shift that catches gardeners off guard with other sun-loving perennials applies here too. Trees that were bare or half-leafed in early spring are fully filled in by August, and a bed that had 6 hours of clear sun in May can be down to 3 or 4 by now without you noticing, because you're not standing in that exact spot at that exact hour anymore. Walk out at midday and actually look at how much direct light is hitting the bed right now. If your phlox has gone thin and leggy, with blooms clustered only at the very top of the stems, and you're sure you planted it in full sun, check whether that's still true before you blame the plant. Number 6. Feed lightly to support the second flush, but never with a high nitrogen mix. This is the opposite lesson from a lot of perennials this time of year, so pay attention. Unlike some drought-tough perennials that do better left alone, phlox is a moderately hungry bloomer, and a light feed right after your first major deadheading round genuinely helps push that second flush of flowers instead of leaving the plant to coast on stored energy alone. The mistake is reaching for a high nitrogen all-purpose fertilizer because it's what's already in the shed. Excess nitrogen on phlox produces soft, fast, top-heavy stem growth that's more prone to flopping in wind and rain, and that same lush new growth is exactly what spider mites and aphids prefer to feed on. A balanced, lower nitrogen, slow-release feed, or a simple compost top dress worked lightly into the soil around the base, gives the plant what it needs to rebloom without creating a weak, disease-attracting flush of growth. One light application after deadheading is enough. You don't need to feed again for the rest of the season. If this is the first time anyone's actually connected your mildew problem to your watering schedule, instead of just telling you to spray fungicide, hit the like button right now. Number 7. Check for foliar nematodes before you assume every discolored leaf is powdery mildew. This is the one almost nobody talks about, and it gets misdiagnosed constantly. Powdery mildew shows up as a grayish-white, dusty coating sitting on top of the leaf surface. Foliar nematodes look completely different and are frequently mistaken for it anyway. They cause angular, brownish-black patches on the leaves that are bounded by the leaf veins, usually starting low on the plant and working upward. And the damage tends to look streaky or blotchy, rather than powdery. There is no spray that fixes foliar nematodes. Fungicide does nothing for them because they aren't a fungus. They're a microscopic worm living inside the leaf tissue. And they spread through splashing water exactly like mildew does, which is why the two get confused so often. If you're treating what you think is stubborn mildew all season and nothing is working, foliar nematode damage is worth ruling out. The only real fix is removing and destroying affected foliage, never composting it, and keeping water off the leaves entirely going forward, since splash is how it spreads plant to plant. And separately, don't confuse any of this with creeping phlox, Phlox subulata, the low spring-blooming ground cover type. That one already finished flowering back in spring and doesn't share these summer disease issues at all. If someone told you to deadhead or divide your phlox back in April, and it's the low creeping kind along a rock wall, that advice was for a completely different plant than the tall garden phlox this video is about. Here's your complete August phlox checklist before you go. Thin, overcrowded clumps to improve airflow between stems. Deadhead every spent cluster within 3 to 5 days to trigger reblooming and stop off-color seedlings. Water deeply at the base in the morning, never overhead in the evening. If mildew shows up every single year regardless of care, consider replacing with a resistant variety like Gina, Robert Poor, or David. Confirm you're still getting 6 or more hours of real direct sun. Feed lightly with a low nitrogen mix only after deadheading, never a heavy dose. And before you treat anything for mildew, check whether it's actually foliar nematode damage instead, because they are not the same problem and they don't have the same fix. Subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell, and before you go, drop 2 things in the comments. What state or zone are you gardening in? And is your phlox dealing with mildew, mites, or something else entirely right now? I read every single comment and it shapes exactly what this channel covers next. Now go check the base of your phlox before you check the leaves at the top.